Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to lesson 53 in this series on developing a survival game. This is the final lesson for section 4 of this series, and in this video we'll be setting up our island's fog, our lighting, our sunbeam stroke god rays for use in, well, playability and in our dynamic weather system. Now that said, I am going to make some comments in this video that are no longer accurate to the direction this series is taking. For example, I'll talk about how we're going to use lighting in particular ways in our dynamic weather system. I've decided after recording this video to take a different approach. So while all the elements that I use in this video, -1, will show up in our dynamic weather system, some of the side comments I make about, we'll be updating this later on, aren't accurate to how I said them at the time. We will be updating them, but not in the way in which I explained it during this video. That said, this video and this series have been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors, and all of that said, congratulations on making it to the end of section 4. I hope you've enjoyed setting up your landscape. I hope you've enjoyed doing all the foliage stuff. And now, with all of that said, fire up your projects and let's get started. Hello and welcome to the final video in section 4 of this series. In this video, we'll be finishing out our environment with our lighting, so we have a little bit more of a immersive environment and so that it's easier to see in these dark areas. To begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start organizing our environment a little bit better in terms of the folders here. I'm going to move this into our lighting, for example. I'm going to open up our lighting for our sky. I'm just going to move the light source. The rotation matters, the location, however, doesn't matter. And the reason I'm moving it to 0, 0, 0 is that our sky sphere is also located there. Anything that doesn't matter for our lighting, I'm going to try to put at 0, 0, 0. So that done, the next thing we're going to need to do is set up our exponential height fog. So let's just go into our search classes here and do exponential. We have exponential height fog right there. And I bring that in, we get this misty blue haze, which actually turns the water this nice blue color, doesn't it? I like that color. Now, it's a bit thick. We can use this to mask when textures are loading in. So like when the foliage is loading in, it's a bit harder to see that, hey, the grass isn't loaded in over there. I mean, as we move closer, it becomes a little bit more obvious, but at distance, it does kind of obscure stuff. And it gives us an overall nice feel. For now, I'm just going to leave that in because I just want that there. I'm not going to do anything with it quite yet. But we do need to have one more thing in terms of lighting before we can continue. And we'll come back to the exponential height fog in just a moment. We need to take care of these dark shadow areas. And yeah, it says preview. I love how it's upside down there. So what we need to do is add a skylight in. And we have our skylight here. And I'm just going to drop it into the world. And suddenly it becomes much easier to see things. The lighting is much better. So I'm just going to move this to 0, 0, 0 because it doesn't matter where this one's located. And you can add a cube map if you have one, if you want to. You can specify a particular cube map. I'm not going to for this, at least at this stage, because I don't have a free cube map that I think is appropriate for this and that I can use. But it now makes the island much easier to see around, even in the darker areas. So we can mess with these settings individually for each of these, but we have to think about them in relation to each other. So our skylight, our light source, our exponential height fog, and the other fog we add in, which will be our atmospheric fog, are all going to relate to each other. So let's start with our skylight, just to get this sort of set up. Now, I'm going to use well, actually, do I want to start with the skylight, or do I want to start with the light source? We're going to start with the skylight. I am going to give this a particular color. Now, I'm going to say this now. In the next section, we are going to change this color dynamically based on the time of day and the weather. But I want to give it a sort of morning sort of base hue just for my default color on my skylight. So I am going to change my light color here, and I want a sort of beigey orange color. Now, I know the values I want are 230 by 178, and notice as I do that, it's now a purple color. We get this nice purple tint over everything. It's kind of weird. But what I want you to point out to you is where this purple light is. notice it's in the shadowy areas, the spots that we couldn't see earlier. Whereas the direct light from the light source, where it's hitting this way, because it is pointing that way, and if you don't believe me, we can see that it's pointing in a particular direction. There is the arrow to show you which way it's pointing. And you can also just look at the the sun, light bulb, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I called the sun a light bulb. You can see where it's pointing. You can see that it's overriding this light skylight we have. And that was just to show you, the purple was just to show you where it's affecting. I'm also going to change this value, the blue, to a lower number so we don't get this purple. I'm going to change it to 117. And we now get this more nice, warm, beigey orange color. Kind of creates a nice morning feel. So there we go. We have that sort of color taking over the island, giving the island a little bit more, well, vibrancy, a little bit more life. So we use the sky sphere to lighten up the darker areas that we want to be lit up. And again, notice now in our heavily treed areas, we can see a bit. We don't have to worry so much. Which also means you probably can add some more trees in if you really felt like it. All right. Just going to go back to our starting area. That really does take care of everything. And now when we do things, you might want to recapture the light, which will change how the light's working, but we don't need to do that quite so yet. Let's go on to our exponential height fog here. Now our exponential height fog, location doesn't matter, so I am going to zero it out just so it's all clustered together. What we do need to think about is the density. And we have two layers of fog to worry about. You have a primary layer and a secondary layer. Now we can only affect how thick the secondary layer is. We can't affect the color of it. It comes from the primary layer. So let's address the density of it. Let's just up this for a second. So at 0.5, it's really, really thick. Almost too much so. When I say almost, it is definitely too much so. When it's all the way down to 0, well, you can see the beiginess of the light that I put in earlier and how it's affecting the water. Kind of like how it looks off in the distance. That is kind of the effect we're going for off in the distance. So we want relatively small values because this does affect our lighting. And in addition to this, I'm just going to revert this back to 0.2 for a moment. Notice how it changes the sky. Changes that blueness of the sky almost. So we also have this height fall off here, which is controlling how much it falls in terms of, or how much the density increases as the height, so how high up we are, decreases. And you can actually use that to create some really cool rolling fog effects, by the way, in maps where you have deep trenches and high mountains. So notice that as we go higher up, there's less fog, especially at 2. If I lower this to 0.01, we can see the higher up we go, it's still fairly thick. You can see it out in the distance there really well. And as I change this, you can see, just watch the horizon, or watch where the two sort of blue colors meet. So you can see the water line very faintly along here. It's really hard to see in the center, but if you look at the side of my screen, if I go full screen for a moment here, and then unselect, you can see, starting just under the mouse. When I say under the mouse, I mean literally under it, not below it. Under the middle bar there is a line where our water meets. Kind of reminds me of Myst. I love that game. Alright, so if I start lowering this slowly, you can see the fog is lowering on... Oh, sorry, I'm lowering the wrong thing. I was wondering why I couldn't see it suddenly. And also I'm looking at the sky sphere. Let me get the exponential height fog back selected. So as I start increasing, I'm going to try to do this as slowly as possible. You can see the fog level decreasing. If I go back up, look down at the island, you can see the fog coming up off the island there. So you can use this again to create some really, really cool rolling fog effects. So what you want to do is play with these two settings together to get the effect you want. Now I'm going to use 0.025 here. So it's a little bit thicker than the default fog, but I'm going to lower the fall off. And I guess really the Z placement kind of does matter for the fall off a little bit. Actually, it doesn't. But I'm going to lower it to 0.1 from 0.2. So remember, as we go down, the fog gets a little bit thicker. So I'm going to go to 0.1. And we get this nice sort of misty feel around the island. All right, next, what we have to do is we need to take care of our atmospheric fog. And really, we should be doing this beforehand, but I just did this in a different order. So we're going to do atmospheric fog. Now this one, I'm going to put on the X and Y of 0, but the Z does matter. And in fact, I'm going to increase the altitude scale just to show this. So notice as I did that, what happened. Now as I grab the fog and start rising it up. I might have set the way too high for this to be seen. Let me just find a setting. Let's use our fog multiplier. There we go. And I think if I start raising this up, it should become fairly obvious what's happening. You can see little changes. This one's a bit harder to see, but yes, the height of this does matter. Let me just now make that a negative value real quick. You can see the lighting has changed as I do that. Positive. Let me just make this an even 10,000. Look at the distance in the lighting, the reflection off the water. And as I lower the value, notice it changes there too. Let's go to 5,000. Might be a little bit more visible at 5,000. And then let's change this to negative 5,000. Well, the number I used earlier was a better example. So I'm going to set this at 600, and I'm going to change the fog multiplier back to 1. And notice the effect it's having on our environment. I'm going to change the altitude scale a bit. So I zoom out and I change the altitude scale, say, to 100. Notice what happens and how that affects our environment. Now that's a bit stronger than I want it to be. It really is affecting the water a lot more than I want it to. So I'm going to actually set this to 50. And then we get this nice bluish color on our water. Of course, we're also getting the indirect lighting. So we're going for an even deeper blue that goes further out. And the way to address that and to also make this just feel a little bit better is to work on our light source itself. So let's just move this into our sky, by the way, so it affects our sky. Go to our light source now. And our light source, we're gonna wanna change its value. We want to change how strong the light is. So I'm going to increase the value from 3.14 lux to 10 lux. And there we go. We now have that thicker blue color coming out from our light. We have darker and richer shadows. We do get more darkness in these areas despite the skylight, but still it's visible and the play area is usable. We again get that nice blue across the entire map. Come around to this side again, we have darkness, but it's still playable. And same over here, and same on the other areas where we had deep, dark shadows before. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can start talking about other parts of our lighting, like getting God rays in. And there's a couple of ways to do God rays, and we're actually going to use both of them. So, first I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to look for our... I'm getting to the God ray thing. I'm going to look for our atmospheric and fog sunlight tools, which is under light. It's under the advanced settings here. We do have that activated. So if it isn't active, make sure it's active. All our settings here look to be correct for what we want to do. All right, and then let's go down to light shafts, which have our two versions of our God rays. Now, the reason I picked that color for our sky sphere, our skylight, is actually going to relate to our bloom tint here. These two work in different ways to create God rays. One of them, and I always forget which one, darkens an area where there isn't light to make the light rays stand out. The other ones lighten the area where light is to make the light stand out. The darkening one is a little bit more GPU intensive, at least so I've been told. I've actually never run a test to see what the actual difference between the two are. But I want to find a thick area of trees, and this spot actually is going to be kind of nice for this. And I'm going to turn on our light shaft occlusion here. And you can see as I do that it's darkening the map to make the light brighter. And if I do our light shaft bloom, we're now getting really annoying brighter areas. So this one darkens it, this one lightens it. I thought it was the order in which this happened. So let's start with our darkening. Oh yeah, occlusion, mask, darkness. How dark are we gonna make this area? I mean, we can ignore the mask all in, or we can make it extremely dark. So really what we're doing is we're darkening an area. That's all this is. It's a 0 to 1 scale. Now let's say 0.5, that's one value, 0.75, 0.25. That should give you an idea of what we're looking at. I think anything really high seems a bit fake looking to me. So I wanna go under 0.5, let's go to 0.25, let's go to 0.05. I think that's a little too dark, so I'm gonna go a bit lighter than that and go to 0.1. We get this sort of nice sort of vibe around it, and you can kind of see there he is, the God rays right up there. You can see them coming off the dark areas above the trees and coming between the trees there. So we have our first bit of God ray. You can see him around the corners there. So there we go. We are getting that set up. Let's do our second light shaft. And yeah, that's not pleasant, is it? Really, really isn't. So I'm going to just fix this and we say we have this bloom scale. Fair warning before I do this, this is going to get really, really bright. Boom. That's the highest we can go, and that might be great for a spot where the character is responding to a poison that's really dilated their pupils or something. But you can see the god rays are really thick. We can go really low, and it doesn't exist. Our god rays are coming, if I turn this off, are coming from the light shaft occlusion. So we want to use a small number, because remember the default is 0.2. That's really bad. That's really strong. Go to 0.1. Still really, really strong. So we need to use a small number, 0.01. Nope, still too strong. So we need to go down another fraction of a another place and go to 0.01. That is much better. It's a bit weak in my opinion. So I'm gonna just raise it ever so slightly to 0.005. Here we go. We get a little bit of that sort of effect of the light bouncing around. I don't like the color though, and we're gonna fix the color. I'm just gonna leave it there for a moment. Let's talk about the bloom threshold though for a minute. Let's actually up this back to 0.2. And let's just play with the bloom threshold. You can see the higher the bloom threshold is, the more it sort of addresses that twinklingness that I'm gonna call it, the blindingness of it. Let me put this back to 0.005. And we get still that little twinkle effect there, right? So if I up this, it's a little bit too small for that effect to really register fully, but you might want to play with raising this a bit. Now, our bloom tint, really quickly on this, again, is based on our skylight. Or our skylight actually is based on our bloom tint, because I normally do the skylight last. I just wanted to get the shadows out of the way so we can actually see things a bit easier. So we're going to do a value similar, but I'm going to do a little bit more of an orange color here. So I'm going to do 230 by 165 by 68, and I'm going to leave the alpha as is. And we get this nice sort of orange glow off our light for a good morning sun. And if we're standing here looking at our fog and our water, we have this nice warm orange color. We have god rays coming off that tree there that give it more depth and character. The kind of or mimetic or mirror what you might get if you have a bright light shining behind a tree where you're not going to see everything. We're getting these really dark, thick shadows again. And it just makes the environment just a little bit more natural feeling. So if I go ahead and hit play at this point, and we do need to rebuild lighting, I realize, you'll be able to see just a bit more in our environment. Let me make sure that you have sound. You do. And yeah, you can see I need to rebuild lighting. But here we go. We're starting to get the effect of our god rays. We have a warm sun. Our environment is lit and feels a lot more natural suddenly. And let me just go full screen for you. We can see more clearly. Our horizon point in the distance feels more like it falls off than it just ends. In fact, actually, we can't see the end of the water. Also, all the weird issues of the water while there is still going on over there in the distance feel like it's a bit more, oh, I'm not seeing this correctly due to an optic illusion. So we're masking the fact that the water is a bit wonky out there. We are going to change the water up, remember, but not to address that. And again, we have this nice sort of warm feel off the light. It feels a bit more natural. Yeah, the god rays might be a bit harsh, and you can play with the settings a bit to get the effect you want. But this is what we're looking for. This brings us to what we want to do in the engine, where we want to get our lighting so we can see under the trees here. I can clearly see there's two different types of vegetation. For some reason, I can't get the leafy herb, though. It's too close to that tree. Let me eat the carrot before I start dying. So again, it makes the environment just feel more playable, more lived in, more natural, hopefully a bit more immersive. I swear I heard birds, which might be things I'm hearing outside, but it felt natural hearing birds in that environment. Like, it feels, that moment where I went, oh, I'm hearing birds, and they're definitely birds outside. It felt like it fit with the environment that I'm looking at. It felt like it fit with everything going on here. God knows the foots will probably have bird sounds in them that I haven't noticed, and I'm just hearing that. But this is what we're looking for, and we're really kind of done. All that's left to do, really, and this is all optional stuff, is to play with the settings until you find settings that you like. So, I'm going to change our sky sphere a bit. I want to change my sun brightness, which has already been done, thankfully. I want to just refresh our material. I want to change the sun height offset here to 0.5 51111. If it will let me, it won't. I need to actually change the location of the sun to do that. So let me get my light source, and I'm gonna make my light source movable, by the way. And for my rotation, I want this at 0 by 0. Oh, sorry, no, I don't want this at 0 by 0. I'm giving you the wrong numbers. For my light source, I want the first one at 0, -46, 0. And you can see how that's affecting our light. By the way, the light is now over here. It's not over there. So we need to move the sun. How do we move the sun? Well, with our godlike powers, we select our skylight. No, we don't select our skylight. I lied to you. We select our sky sphere and refresh material. There we go. All right, now the sun's coming from there. So it's now matching up. We now have that set up. We will be moving the light source some more. Again, that's to be expected. We're gonna leave all our other settings as is. And I'm just gonna double check that we've covered everything I want to cover in this video. So give me one moment. No, we haven't done all the changes I want to do. So let's go through our exponential fog. And we want to make this a volumetric fog. Also, I really want to quickly mention something I said earlier, which is around the second fog data here. We're going to be using this to control for our in our weather system and our morning fogs. So we can actually have a second fog that is thicker than the first on top of it. I do want to make this a proper volumetric fog. There we go. That gives a little bit more of a, especially if you think about this as an early morning scene right now, this gives it a more vibrant, you know, lived-in world feel, or livable world. I guess it's not lived in since it's a desolate island. It's actually not desolate, but yeah. But this is, again, a bit strong. Let's play with this value here on our scattering distribution. So we can change how much this fog affects our light. It scatters the light a lot. It scatters the light very little. And it can really kind of play with how that feels. I'm going to use a small value. So this is 0. This is the out at doing any scattering. This is it reducing the scattering, massively increasing. So let's go to 0. And then let's go to 0.1. So if you can't see that difference, I'm going to go back to 0. It's very faint differences. Now, very, very faint to the point it's almost not noticeable. Let's go to 2 for a second. There it's noticeable. Let's go to 1. So if you go to from 2 to 4, again, it's really hard to notice. Go to 9. Really, you need to be looking at the light to do this. So 9, 4, 2. Yeah, you can see it a little bit, but again, it's really hard to notice. But I want this to be a very subtle effect. And I'm going to use 0.05. Notice when I did that, the light effect down here. I'm going to go back up to 9. Notice down here how it changes. 0, how it changes. 0.05. Again, it's a very subtle effect on the fog scattering. And it really, you're only going to notice this at close distances to the camera. So that takes us through that. You can make your material, you can make the lighting emissive if you wanted to. You know, let's just raise that to red. Oh, that's blindingly fog-like. I raised that way too high. Don't go into the HDR spectrum on that one. Stay in the proper RGB. Anything above 1 is starting to get into the HDR. I swear I have a Skyrim mod that does this. It's actually one of the You Use Drug mods one. Oh, that is not pleasant on the eyes. So you can play with this to, you know, even create your own sort of feel for how this is going to affect the world. I did not mean to change the alpha, actually. I'm going to lower the alpha back to 0. You know, we can go to this various shades and colors to affect the feel of the world. I'm going to revert that back to its black. I think it's better as black. If you're going to do anything with the lighting, I think it should be in the albedo. I think it just works a bit better. Still, I'm going to leave it at white. That is one thing to change if you want to. All right, I'm going to now go back and double check I haven't missed anything else for our lighting. Okay, we have it. I'm just going to recapture my skylight just to be on the safe side. We did a little bit of a subtle shift there. And there's one more small thing I want to do. That is, I want to put a sphere caption on each of my waterfront areas. Now I'm going to move them though. And I'm going to move this one back a bit. Because what part I care about is the capture off the water. That's the part that we really, really care about. So I'm just going to move this ever so slightly so that we're capturing this water area. And I'm going to hold Alt down, and I'm going to bring my second capsule over here. In fact, actually, because this one is such a small area, I am going to move this one a bit back over. I'm going to hold both of these down, and I want to move... No, I don't want to move both of them. I want to take my second one and just move it a little bit to the right or left, and my one on the left and move it a little bit to the right, and hopefully, yeah, we have a little bit of overlap. That's what I'm looking for. All right, with that done, I'm going to then move to my other side of the island with holding the Alt key down and then switching over to Shift so that I move with the capture cube here. And I'm gonna tuck this one on this area of my island. Again, I care most about the water, so I'm just gonna have that sort of in the water there. So we're getting the capture is being more focused on in that area. Likewise, again, holding my Alt key down, I'm gonna bring this one out here. Get a bit more of an area here. And likewise here. And then we'll go around to the back side of the island and bring that light capture over here. Or reflection capture, and just this one is going to need probably 2 for this to work, unlike the sound. I mean, we could increase the radius actually. So instead of doing 2, I'm just going to increase the radius. So the idea is I am focusing on the water. It is going out a bit further, which is why I was using 2 of them. I'm going to take number 5 because I don't want to use the increased radius. I'm going to hold the Alt key down. It does rename it to 7, fortunately, and I'm just going to tuck that into there. And one final one right over here. And with that done, I am going to bring this a little bit further out, actually. I'm going to double check where I place that one. And I can bring it a little bit further out. There we go. With that done, I am going to rebuild my lighting, and then we'll take one final look. Sorry, as my lighting's still building, I wanted to show you something. I want you to focus at the middle of the screen for a moment. Actually, sorry, right about there. That is the effect of why the fog heights matter. I'm trying to find a spot where we can see it more easily as we exit the fog. All right, I had to go really far away from the island to be able to show you that more easily because there's a lot of stuff going on here that's affecting our lighting. That said, I'm going to let it finish building the lighting, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. While the lighting has finished, I realized there was something, because I got an error message this time that I've not gotten before, that I realized either I have not covered in the tutorial, and I swear I did, or that we need to cover. And we're going to do this now because this should have been done earlier in this section. We need to open up our static meshes for our heather clumps, apparently. And I'm just double checking that it's nothing else but our heather clumps. It's both of our heather clumps and our buttercup. And yeah. There's some other things in there that we want to talk about, but that is our cast dynamic shadows on our tree. So let's find first our meshes, go to our foliage, go to our flowers, and we want to do, I'm just going to double check that we're going to do the heather first. So I'm going to open up both heathers. Actually, first I'm going to open up this one and hit collision. And you can see we have nothing here. So we need to add a simple collision. The way we do that is go to collision up here and add simple box collision. All right, there we go. Go ahead and save that out. Do the same for the heather number 2. And again, we're going to just do a check that actually doesn't have collision of any sort, and add a simple box collision. Again, save that out. All right, I'm going to just rebuild and make sure that the heather is taken care of before we do the next one. Okay, so that takes care of the heather. We do have to do the buttercup, which if I can get this to open, is our carrot-like one. Again, we'll check. Okay, and we're gonna do a box simplified collision around this. Here we go. And again, I'm just gonna rebuild, and then I'll talk about the tree issue in a moment. All right, and it's done. We got rid of all the errors except for this tree stuff, where it's talking about all 32 of these warnings. They're not errors, they're actually warnings. Are about the performance impact our trees can have on the game. And what I want to point out with this is it is a warning. It isn't something we should ignore, but it is a warning. We don't need to act on it just because we received a warning. What we need to do is test things. And we're not at the stage where we can actually test that to worry about it, but what is that warning saying? Let's just talk about that real quick. If I select just one of these trees for a moment. There we go. The item mesh is set to movable, which is going to have a bit of an impact on the lighting. It's going to have a lot of impact on the lighting compared to stationary, where the light is baked. Or sorry, static, where the light is baked. So we will explore the different lighting methods here after we get our weather system in place, because our weather system is really going to affect how our lighting works. So don't worry about that right now. It's just letting you know, hey, there might be this problem where there's an impact on performance. You can always do stat FPS to see what the impact is. And I am only getting half of what I normally get. For some reason, the stream element of this really does kill my rating here, or my FPSs. FPSs. Yeah, you know what I meant to say. So do take that with a grain of salt. Just be mindful of it, and it will be something we'll come back and look at down the road. All right, so I've already recorded the outro, and I just noticed there was a small bug, so I'm going to edit this in. I didn't see it until the outro, which actually relates to what we've just done at the end here. Yeah, our meshes are causing problems. So really quickly, I'm just going to plop myself here and hit play from here and show you what's going on. And then I'm going to go back directly into the outro. So that isn't due to the environment. That's due to the plant there. And yeah, so that's kind of problematic. We need to be able to walk there, so we need to make sure the collision on that is turned off. You know, we can ignore the warning that there is no collision, but we need it for something down the road, which is why I was a bit confused why it wasn't there. Funny part is we're not getting it for the arrow. I'm not sure why. So what we can do is we can go to our, well, let's just click this, and let's go to, I guess we can't do it that way. Let's go to core. Go to actors, go to our items, go to resources, go to food, and we're gonna do our herbs and just make sure that the collisions are all set appropriately. So that's herb medium random. So let's go to herb medium random and make sure that our collisions are, let's do no collision for now. I didn't want to do that. No collision. Thank you. Let's hit compile real quick and test this out. So again, I'm just gonna plot myself right next to that particular branch of heather. And there we go. We can walk through it again. So just make sure that anything that we have is set for correct collision. Again, I'll probably be updating this as we go through. All right, I'm gonna edit back into the outro now. All right, with that said, congratulations on making it through section 4 of this tutorial series. This series has been brought to you by Patreon sponsors like Rian, who, in the original recording of this, when I had massive issues with getting the water to be blue, this shade, despite my prep file having it. And by the way, if your water isn't blue, it's the refraction. You missed the refraction thing that I pointed out earlier in the material settings. We spent hours going over the prep file and the record file to find that small mistake. And she sat with me as I was losing my patience and getting really snippy at the program. So again, a huge shout out to Rian for all her support in doing this series and for all the icon work she's done. So yeah, again, a huge shout out to Rian and also all other Patreon sponsors like Hanas, Quad Menson, Connor, 1Vault10, and Galois. Hopefully you have enjoyed setting up your environment and you've enjoyed seeing all the things we've done earlier in the series, like setting up our inventory system and our items for our world and seeing them actually have an impact on what we're doing and seeing the game environment starting to come together. All right, all of that said, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.